Hi everyone, welcome to Ms. Awagid's math class. We will be talking about slopes, and I would like you to watch the video about slopes that was posted before. It will explain how do you find the steepness of a surface, which is the slope. So for today's lesson, we will be talking about finding the slope in a coordinate plane, finding the equations that we can use to find the slope of a line in a coordinate plane. First of all, let's draw the coordinates, the y-axis and the x-axis, where they meet at the origin. Then I would like to draw a line crosses the x and the y-axis. Now choose two dots on the line, and the yellow dots, the first one, I will name it x1, y1, and the second one, I will name it x2, y2, because I don't know what the value of x and y on that graph yet. So now we said the slope is the vertical line divided by the horizontal line. So I wanted you to draw a line to connect the first dot with the second one. So draw a vertical line first that goes from the first yellow line, but stop right there, and that would be the rise. And then from this point, run to the second dot, yellow dot, and that would be the run. Did you notice something? The rise is the same as the change in y. How did y change from this point to this point? And the run is the change of x. The change of y, the word change means minus or difference. So if I take the value of y2 minus y1, gives me the change in y, which is the rise. And if I take the x2 minus x1, which is the difference in the x's, gives you the change in the x, and that is the run. Now let's review a couple more things that we talked about last lesson. If you put a dot where the line, the black line, intercept the y-axis, that's called the y-intercept, where x is 0 and y is the value of b. And if you draw a dot where the black line intersects the x-axis, that's called the x-intercept, where x is the value of a and y is always 0 for that line to cross the x-axis. Now here's the graph we just created. Let's find the different methods or equations to find the slope. Slope, we talked about it. It's the ratio of vertical line divided by the horizontal line. And the letter m represents the slope. So m equal the change in y divided by the change of x, because the change in y is the vertical line and the change of x is the horizontal line. Now, we use symbols sometimes, so we can write delta y divided by delta x. That triangle is called delta, and delta means change. Another way, m equal, which is the slope equal, we can use the difference between the y's divided by the difference between the x's, because those are the change in y divided by the change of x. Another way to find the slope, m equal the rise divided by the run. The rise is the vertical line and the run is the horizontal line from one point on the line to get to the other point. In word problems, the words per, every, and each indicate a rate of change, which means, for example, relating the amount of money you pay each pound of tomato, or the speed 65 miles per hour, relating the distance with the time. So now let's review the equation written in slope-intercept form. Those are linear equations. Y equal mx plus b, where m is the slope or the rate of change, b is the y-intercept or the initial value. How can you find those values? The slope in words, per, every, or each means the slope, or you can use the vertical line divided by the horizontal line, the change in y divided by the change in x, or delta y divided by delta x. You can use the difference in the y's divided by the difference in the x, or you can use the rise over run. B is the y-intercept. Here's the graph to remind you where the line crosses the y-axis. That's why I call it the y-intercept. At 0b, for it to cross the y-axis, x has to be 0. in words, initial value or starting value or beginning value, they all indicate a starting point or the y-intercept. Also, b is the value of y when x equals 0. Keep that in mind. B is the value from a coordinate pair where x is 0 and b is the y value. And b is where the line crosses the y-axis. They all the same thing. That's how we find the y-intercept. How can you describe the slope of a line just by looking at the graph? Remember this. You read the line from left to right, just like you read your book. Here's a graph. Read it from left to right. What's happening to that green line? The line is going up from left to right, which means it's a positive slope. Now the second one, the line from left to right is going down, which means it's a negative slope. The third one, the line from left to right, it's a horizontal line, which means 0 slope. And the last one, it's a vertical line, which means undefined slope. Here's a graph. Describe the slope of the line from a graph, then find the slope. We always read the line from left to right. So this line is going up, which means I should end up with a positive slope. Use those two equations to find the slope now. Choose 2 dots on the line. Does it matter which 2 dots? No, because linear equations, they have constant rate of change, constant slope, so the slope should be the same at any point. So choose 1 dot, and I will choose -4, -4, and the second dot, 0, 4. Now, to do the rise over run, draw your vertical line from the first dot, go up, but stop where the second dot is. And now count spaces, but remember the y-axis is counting by 2, so each space is worth 2. If you want to count spaces, that would be 2, 4, 6, 8, or count from -4 to 4, that's also going up by 8. Now run from this point to the other one, which is counting the x-axis also by 2, so if you want to count spaces, that's 2 spaces, or count from -4 to 0, that would be +4 because you're going to the right. So the slope is +8 divided by 4, which equals 2 when you simplify that. The second way is to write those 2 coordinates, name them x1, y1, x2, y2, write the equation m equal y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, substitute the numbers, but make sure you use the y first. y2 is 4 minus y1 is -4 divided by x2 is 0 minus x1 is -4. Now simplify that. So 8 divided by 4 equals 2. You got the same answer. Here's another problem. From left to right, the line is going down, which means it's a negative slope. Now if I use rise over run, this time I'm going down from left to right. So I wanted you to go down from the first dot that's already there to the second dot. You're counting by 1, so you can count spaces or see the difference in the y's, and that's going down by 3 or -3. And then run to reach to the other point. That's adding 4 by counting spaces. So the rise over run is -3 over 4, and that's your slope. The second way is to find the change in y divided by the change of x. First, write the coordinates, 0, 7, and 4, 4 for those 2 points. It doesn't matter which 2 coordinates you use. Name them x1, y1, x2, y2, and then write the equation. Substitute the numbers. Make sure you start with the y on the numerator and the x on the denominator, and that's the biggest mistake students will do. Then simplify that. 4 minus 7 is -3. 4 minus 0 is 4. So the slope is -3 over 4, which is the same thing you got when you did the rise over run. Now finding the slope from a table, choose any of those 2 equations, the change in y divided by the change of x, or delta y divided by delta x, or the change in y as y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. The first table, write m equal the change in y divided by the change of x. Now find the change in y. How did y change from -3 to 0 to 6 to 9? It's by 3, by 6, and again by 3. How did x change? It's from -3 to -3 to -3. That is 0, so it did not change. Now the slope is the change in y, but as you can see, there's 3, 6, and 9. But if I divide 3 divided by 0 or 6 divided by 0, you still get undefined. So the slope is undefined. Any number divided by 0 equals undefined. Or you can choose 2 coordinates from the table. Write the first coordinate as x1, y1, the second coordinate as x2, y2. And then write the equation of y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Substitute the numbers in the equation. Make sure you start with the y on the numerator and the x on the denominator. You end up with 9 over 0, and 9 divided by 0 equals undefined, so the slope still undefined. Now the second one, same thing. The slope is the change in y divided by the change of x. Find out how did y change from 20, 14, 8 to 2. It went down by 6. And how did x change, which is delta x, from 4 to 7 to 10 to 13? That is adding 3. Now divide those two numbers, -6 divided by +3. That gives you slope of -2. Another method is to write the 2 coordinates from the table. Name them x1, y1, x2, y2. Write the equation, substitute the numbers, and find the difference in the y's divided by the difference in the x. And that gives you -6 divided by 3. Simplify that. -6 divided by 3 is -2, the same as this first method. Now the last one, the change in y. How did y change from 2 to 2? That's 0. How did x change from -1 to 1 to 3 to 5? That is adding 2. Now divide them. Make sure the y on the top, on the numerator first. So the 0 divided by 2 equals 0. So the slope equals 0. The second method is to find 2 coordinates from the table, or 2 points from the table. Name them x1, y1, x2, y2. Write the equation and find the difference in the y's first and then the x's. And you end up with 0 divided by 2. And 0 divided by 2 equals 0. So the slope still 0. How can you identify the slope and the y-intercept from an equation? If it's written in y equal mx plus b, that's a slope-intercept form. So they're giving you the slope and the y-intercept, where m is the slope or the rate of change and b is the y-intercept. Keep in mind, the slope is the coefficient of x and the y-intercept is the constant, which is b. Constant stands by itself, coefficient is attached to the x. You're multiplying it by the x. So here's 3 examples. The first one, it is a linear function written in a slope-intercept form. The coefficient is -6, and that's the slope, and the constant is 1, so the y-intercept is 1. Now the second one, y equals 8, that's a constant function. It is a function because it's y equals, and it's a number by itself. So they're only giving you the constant, which is 8, and that's the y-intercept. So where is the slope? So I can write it as y equals 0x plus 8, where 0 is the slope, and the y-intercept is 8. The last one, x plus 4y equals -10. This is a linear function, but it's written in a standard form. So change it to slope-intercept form, which means isolate y. Get rid of the x first. Subtract x from both sides. You end up with 4y equal -x minus 10. Now get rid of the 4 by dividing each term by 4. Every single term in the equation. So divide all 3 terms by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. You end up with y equal, so -1 over 4x minus 10 over 4. Simplify that, you get y equals -4x minus 5 over 2, or 2.5. So the slope is the coefficient of x, which is -1/4, and the y-intercept is the constant by itself, which is -5 over 2. Graphing linear equations in slope-intercept form. How can we graph it? If it's written in standard form, rewrite it in a slope-intercept form. So get rid of the x first. Subtract -2x from both sides. You end up with y equals -2x plus 2. Now the slope is the coefficient, which is -2, and the y-intercept is 2. You always start with the y-intercept. So go on the y-axis, find 2 and put that dot, and it's the red dot. Now we use the slope, and I want the slope to be rise over 1 run. So the slope is -2. Put it over 1 to make it a fraction, which means you go down 2, write 1, go down 2, write 1, and put the dots, and then connect them. The second one, y equals 8. That is written in a slope-intercept form. The slope is 0 and the y-intercept is 8. So on the graph, start with the y-intercept, find 8, put a dot, and that's the red dot. Now write it as a rise over run for the slope, which means 0 divided by any number. So do not rise anywhere, just run from the 8 and put a dot anywhere you want and then connect them. Now how can you write the equation or the function from words? A linear function h models a relation in which the dependent variable decreases 2 units for every 5 units the independent variable increases. Graph h when h of 0 equals 4. Identify the slope, the y-intercept, and the x-intercept. As a reminder, here's the different names of the y, and here are the different names for the x, because they did use different names for x and y. So look for your clues. The clue number 1, dependent is the y, independent is the x. The word every means a rate of change, so that is the slope, which is the change in y divided by the change of x. The second clue is h of 0. And if you remember and look at the y, h of 0 is the value of y when x equals 0. So the slope is the rate of change, which is -2 over 5. And the y-intercept is 4 because h of 0 equals 4. To graph it, here's the graph. Start with the y-intercept. Go on the y-axis, look for 4 and put a dot, and that's the red one. Now use the slope. So go down 2 and increase the x by 5. So go down 2, write 5, and put a dot, draw a line through it. Now extend your line. Where did that line cross the x-axis? Right on 10. So intercept equals 10. That's it for today's lesson. You guys have a great day.